Okay, good evening and welcome. I now call the March 2nd board meeting of the Lane Community College Board of Education to order. In order to continue conducting meetings in a manner that promotes the safety and well-being of our community, this meeting is being held remotely. I'd like to remind board members and staff to keep themselves muted and to use the hand raise feature when you would like to speak. Board members are also asked to have their video turned on so you're visible to the viewing public. Donna, could you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Holly Johnson.
Here.
Angela Van Kraus.
Present.
Mike Eister.
Here.
Austin Folnaghy.
Here.
Steve Mattel.
Here.
Rosie Pryor.
Here.
Lisa Fragola.
Here. So like we're all present. Great. So the board will open the meeting with an acknowledgement of homeland and that the meeting takes place on the traditional homeland of the Kalapuya. Wendy Simmons, health professions faculty member, a cooperative education coordinator, and the employee wellness coordinator will read the land acknowledgement for us this evening. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. We acknowledge that the land on which Lane Community College is built is the traditional land of the Kalapuya people. I ask you to join me in acknowledging Indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We also acknowledge that our institutions were founded upon genocide, erasures, and exclusions of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land our institutions are located. Our institutions must acknowledge and make visible the ongoing effects of systemic oppression and intergenerational trauma that affects all of us. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and begin a process of restorative justice. As I reflect on this, I think honoring and respecting the land as Indigenous communities have done and continue to do so may be one of the best actions we can take to create a more sustainable and harmonious future together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. So I'd like to go ahead and adopt the agenda with flexibility. Without objection, I'd like to adopt the agenda with flexibility. Is there any objection? Okay, seeing none, we have adopted the agenda with flexibility. Before we go to the president's report tonight, board member Austin Folnaghy has suggested a moment of silence for the people of Ukraine who've lost their lives or those of their loved ones in the current conflict in Ukraine. So I'd like to ask that we take a moment of silence for the current conflict in Ukraine. Okay, let's continue. Thank you for that suggestion, Austin. Dr. Hamilton, would you like to give the president's report?
Thank you, Chair Fragola. Welcome everyone to the March 2022 board meeting. I'd like to present some highlights of the month before. First off, our new Vice President of Finance and Operations is here with us tonight, Dr. George Stalliard. He'll be working virtually until he relocates later this month. We welcome you, Dr. Stalliard, to this board meeting. I'd like to congratulate our Longhouse Steward and Native American Student Program Faculty Coordinator, Lori Tapahanzo, for being selected to serve on the equity panel for the Eugene Riverfront Festival, which is a celebration of the region's cultural diversity during the World Athletics Championship. We thank Lori for her ongoing work in cultural diversity. I recently participated in the United States DOE listening session with J. Noah Brown. He's the senior advisor for the Office of Career and Tech Ed. And we were talking about affordable, accessible early childhood programs. Listening sessions are ways that the DOE can get feedback on how to strengthen the career programs and the workforce. We're going to hear a little bit later on about our accreditation. We received our affirming letter for Lane Community College to become fully accredited for the next 7 years. Very exciting. And on top of that, we are identified as a top performing school with 6 commendations. So we are just so extremely happy, and you're going to hear more about this later in the agenda. More good news, by the way. In February, the Commission on Dental Accreditation granted our dental hygiene program full accreditation status, approval without reporting requirements, which is very good in the accreditation world. So congratulations to our faculty, our students, and Dean Corey Minor, and all the staff that helped make that program so wonderful. More congratulations to Student Veterans Center. Lane Community College is going to be receiving $58,500, which I heard is the largest award in grant funding from the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs. This money will help us bolster our services to our students. It's always wonderful to see our Maxwell Student Veterans Center recognized for all their good work. March is Women's History Month, and each year I've been hosting a panel featuring women who are providing leadership to this community. This year's theme is how the pandemic has transformed our work. We'll be hearing from Bonnie Mickelson, CEO and President of the Springfield Chamber, Eve Gray, the new Lane County Director for Health and Human Services, and Dr. Jessica Howard, the President at Chemeketa Community College. I look forward to hearing about their experiences, and I invite anyone who's interested and has the time to check the website for the link. In an effort to continue to improve communications at Lane, I've invited Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer Richard Plott and Shane Turner, our Chief Human Resource Officer, to join me and to join Paul, the Provost, in our monthly newsletter. This has been a way for us to get very timely information out to the college community. It's been extremely busy in Salem, as you all know, the short sessions coming to a close, and I really appreciated all the support you all gave us. And I thank everybody that made phone calls, wrote emails, letters to help get some of our initiatives through. By the next time we meet, we should be able to report out on what the status of all those actions have been. In addition, the ACCT National Legislative Summit was last month in Washington. Thank you, Board Member Folnege, for attending on behalf of the college. Meetings with the Oregon delegation were held on Zoom, and it made it possible for myself, other board members, and staff to advocate on behalf of community colleges. We've been in the news quite a bit this week. The stories, some of the links are in the packet. We'll have to add some more. And in closing, I really want to take a few minutes to remember the contributions of one of our founding board members, Bob Ackerman. Bob passed away last week, and he leaves a long legacy of public service. As an attorney, Bob sought ways to help this community through public service. He served on the Springfield City Council and then 3 terms as a state representative. He served as the college's first Board of Education in 65 to 73. That was very interesting. I didn't know that. And then he served 3 additional terms between 99 and 2015. So the board has honored Bob's contributions by renaming our tutoring center the Robert L. Ackerman Tutor Center in the past. We're very grateful for his legacy, his leadership, and his support of our mission. Our condolences are extended to his wife and family. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to statements from the audience. Board Policy BP 320 states that the board will not respond directly to issues raised by the audience, but will refer those issues to the president for appropriate action. However, we do appreciate attendees' participation in tonight's LCC board meeting and the willingness of stakeholders to address the board. You will, if you are providing public comment tonight, you'll enter the board meeting as an attendee, and then you will be moved over to the meeting as a participant. When it is your turn to speak, the meeting host will unmute your speaker, and you may start your video if you choose. Please keep your comments to the 3 minutes allotted to each speaker. So I see our first person who has signed up for public comment tonight is Eric Kim, who will be followed by Jerry Minahan. I know I saw Eric in the attendees section. Welcome.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome.
Good evening, Board of Education and President Hamilton. My name's Eric Kim. I'm a faculty member in the Social Science Division. I'll summarize some of the responses in an all-faculty survey created in November of 2021. This survey guides the LCCA bargaining team to best represent faculty interests in the upcoming negotiations for the economic reopener for 2022-2024. 249 part-time and full-time faculty members participated. Regarding workload and uncompensated time, 74% of respondents work more than their assigned and compensated FTE. 34% of respondents work 21% or more of their assigned and compensated FTE. If you assume a 40-hour work week, 1/3 work an additional 8 hours or more per week. 97% work some evenings or weekends outside of their regularly assigned times. 84% work evenings or weekends at least half the weeks each term. Regarding necessity and basic needs, while working as faculty at LCC, some relied on government assistance and experienced food insecurity. 36% of non-retired part-time and 8% of full-time faculty reported relying on government assistance. 10% of non-retired part-time and 3% of full-time faculty experienced food insecurity during the last year. Regarding impacts on conditions of faculty work and student learning, 98% of faculty strongly agree that they are committed to serving students. 55% of non-retired part-time and 62% of full-time faculty report stress from their jobs affects their life outside of work. 29% of part-time and 41% of full-time faculty have considered seeking a job elsewhere due to working conditions at LCC. 19% report not having office space at LCC that allows them to meet privately with students. 21% report not having access to technology needed to do their job. We need to pay parity for part-time faculty. As a country, we are experiencing the biggest jump in inflation in the last 40 years, and our salaries are already 6% behind inflation. We need substantial COLAs. We need additional steps. And above all else, we need to make sure our faculty can meet basic needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Up next, we have Jerry Minahan, followed by Paula Thani. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, Board Chair Fragola. Good evening, Board and President Hamilton. I'm Jerry Minahan, a faculty member and cooperative education coordinator at Lane Community College. I'm reading a story written by Zara Apostos, who could not be here this evening. Zara writes, I'm a new full-time faculty in the ABSC department, but in the past I worked part-time in both the ESL and ABSC departments for 5 years. As a part-time instructor and a single person, I was always juggling 2 or 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet and pay my monthly bills, including student loan debt that I incurred to become an educator. It was very stressful not knowing from term to term if I was going to be offered a class to teach at LCC and having to figure out how to plan my budget accordingly with this everlasting job insecurity. On top of that, I had to spend a lot of gas money out of pocket to transport myself to different jobs every day. For example, during one term, some mornings I would have to drive to LCC main campus to make copies for teaching and then drive out to East Springfield to teach GED classes because there was not a stable copier at that satellite site in Springfield. After teaching in Springfield, I would drive to Corvallis once a week to teach a linguistics class for pre-service teachers at OSU. In addition to extra gas spent for transportation, it was mentally exhausting to transition among the different institutions and varying expectations from each individual job site. It also affected my physical health due to the stress and time invested in juggling this work schedule and not having enough free time or energy for self-care, such as regular exercise and eating balanced home-cooked meals. While most faculty no longer have to commute much to teach since so much of our teaching modality is online now, We are incurring other expenses working from home all day, such as increases in electricity and internet bills and setting up better workstations, chairs, desks, and other ergonomic equipment. These expenses are increasing exponentially with the current rapid inflation and rising cost of living. I know that the increased time that I now spend on the computer grading, preparing lessons, and teaching online has taken a mental toll on me and definitely a physical toll on my body. During the pandemic, I have had to pay 3 times as much out of pocket compared to pre-pandemic days for medical expenses related to mental and physical fatigue and computer overuse injuries. For example, physical therapy, massage, increased costs of vitamins and medications. Many faculty and their family members, like my own, have serious health issues that have been impacted by COVID, which in turn impact us all financially and in other ways. An increase in benefits for faculty members during a time of rising costs of living makes sense on both an economic level and a human level. By taking care of us as educators, we can focus more on helping our students thrive. That's all. I just wanted to quickly mention Board Chair Frogla. I do appreciate you pronouncing my name correctly every time I come to speak.
Thank you. Up next, we have Paula Thani. Welcome, Paula.
There I am. Thank you, Chair Fragala. And my name is actually pronounced Tony, but that is not your fault. It is a sneaky H in there.
Thank you for the correction.
Sure. I am Paula Tony, and I work in the Math and Science Division at Lane. I am reading a statement tonight on behalf of Marianne Farrington, who is unable to be here tonight. She writes, "My name is Marianne Farrington, and I work at LCC in the Health Professions, Health and Physical Education Division. I have been employed at LCC as a part-time physical education instructor for approximately 21 years. Being a part-time instructor at LCC is difficult and stressful. I have advanced to the top salary step where I have stayed for years, which means I have little chance of getting any salary increase. Very infrequently, LCC will add 1/2 or 1 full step to the top of the salary scale. This is not enough to have any significant impact on my salary. I recently adopted a child that I had in foster care. The state does help with a small stipend. However, it's very costly to raise a child, and especially in these uncertain financial times. With the pandemic and inflation, I find it very hard to make ends meet. Food and basic necessities like shelter and utilities are extremely expensive, and my child also has special needs that must be considered. Medical and dental care are expensive, and I have to pay out of pocket for my child as I can't afford the additional insurance coverage for my child. My insurance as a part-time instructor is covered. Any family members must be paid for out of pocket. Times are uncertain, and inflation is the highest it has been in 40 years, with no hope of prices coming down in the near future. It would be lovely and have a significant impact if multiple steps were added to the top of the salary scale, if the hourly pay rate was increased, or if we received a decent cost of living raise to keep up with inflation. I would like to be able to create some security for myself and my child in these difficult times." And I just want to say, as a full-time instructor, I'm always really aware of the part-time instructors and how different their financial situation is compared to mine. But thank you for listening.
Paula, and that is the last person I have signed up for public comment tonight. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any item that a board member would care to pull from the consent agenda for review?
Move approval. Second.
Okay, moved for approval by Rosie Pryor, seconded by Mike Eister. Donna, can you call the roll for that, please?
Holly Johnson,
Aye.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Aye.
Austin Fullnagy,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. So our first action item tonight is the Florence Major Maintenance Contract lease for Crutcher Lewis. And we have Tom Goodhue to speak with us about that. Good evening, Tom.
Thank you, Chair Fragola. We have the CMGC approval and contract gross guaranteed maximum price contract before you tonight. The CMGC process here basically has 3 steps. The first, which was done before the board in August, was approval of using this contracting method. That allowed us to put it out an RFP, make the selection. For this particular project, we had 3 construction companies that responded to the RFP. We found Lease Crutcher Lewis to be the best qualified for this particular project. That's talked about in the memo of those. The second 2 processes we're looking at bringing before you tonight is, 1, approval of this selection, but it also ties to the actual contract amount that we're going into. We had initial pre-construction contract it was about $34,000, which was handled without the board approval. Got us under contract. We worked through the conditions of, we use AIA contracts for our construction contracts. We refined all of that. Today in your packet, you have what is called Amendment 1, which sets the guaranteed maximum price for the project. We are at a point, while documentation by the architects is not quite complete, and we do not have in building permits, but we are ready to proceed with contracting, begin bidding process based on these documents and based on what we've put together. We've had ongoing discussions about all the materials and the scope of this, so that we all, both staff, the architect, and the contractor, understand what we're doing. So that's kind of the process that we've gotten to. And I also want to take just a quick moment and give a brief summary. The CMGC process is a little bit different than the design, bid, build process, which is probably the most common. The design, bid, build process, sorry, a lot of letters in there. That process is truly a linear process where the architect completely finishes the drawings. The owner agrees to everything that's in there. It goes out into the public. Bidders and contractors look at it. They come in and they give us a fixed price to do what is described in those documents, and then they go off and build on it. With the CMGC process, it's a little bit different because the contractor is selected and they work in conjunction with the architect to help choose materials and guide constructability issues, as well as they're able to look for different pricing based on the marketplace. And the current construction marketplace and supply chains are boggle everyone right now. So it's been a real constraint. The number before you of the $6,898,045 is what is considered a guaranteed maximum price. Based on the knowledge and the documentation they have, the contractor agrees to be able to pull it off for that price or less. One of the great advantages of the CMGC for the owner, as opposed to what a design or a bid project may be, is if you've read through this document, you'll see allowances and things like that. Any contractor does a street very similar to this for a bid project. The difference here is they show us all of this and we agree that this is the max. If it's a bid process, a contractor goes through these things and decides how tight how much risk they're gonna take and cut down, or can they come back at us later and say, hey, you didn't tell us we needed that in the documents. And we see that, so we know we can get a change order for that. We've been through this GMP, the list, you can see the level of detail. It's a very open book process as opposed. So if things come out below this overall, we get that money back to use or to reinvest. There will be things that will be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and we work through that along the way. And that's where the contractor has a bidding contingency in there that we use for when things come in a little bit higher. But otherwise, they're agreeing to say, we're going to get this done for this $6,898,048. So I'll stop.
Thank you. Austin?
Tom, always great presentation. Thank you. So a lot of these jobs, are we able to utilize the local labor force in this, or is it going to be some individuals commuting from inland in the county?
Well, it's going to be a little bit of both. In that GMP amendment, there is some discussion of how they're doing that and where they're at, really trying to favor Lane County. And the coast on this one as well is one that I will, what I'm told at least is there are some really good contractors just outside the county line, up and down the coast, that they hope to include as well. But looking at that, making sure we're meeting these other aspects of the community benefits agreement, making sure we're doing our best to get that minimum wage that's asked for, the full insurance benefits, those types of things. So as we proceed on, that is in all of those bid documents. So we'll be doing that.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to move approval of the Florence CMGC process with a proposed price of $6,898,045.
Second.
Okay, so we have a recommendation and a motion by Mike Eister and seconded by Austin. Mike, did you want to speak to your motion? And then we'll go to Steve Mattel.
Well, I saw that Angela and I both asked Tom very pointed questions. I was satisfied with his responses. I will mention that earlier in an earlier life, I had a guaranteed maximum price project where the architect and contractor met the guaranteed price by shrinking the square footage of the project, much to my chagrin. So I hope we're protected from that. But I think it's a good process, and I'm really happy with the level of detail and work that you put into it, Tom.
Thank you. It's a fixed building already, so they can't really shrink it.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm just following up on the questions that Mike and Angela wrote. I read the responses. I guess I don't quite yet understand what the incentive is to, in this case, Lewis Crutch, to try and improve upon that guaranteed maximum price.
Well, I get that. It is looking at bids. They go out and they're required to get 3 bids on each of these scopes of work. And we are in there with them to choose which ones give us the best value. So there is that. I think the biggest thing is they're on the hook for if things start to come in over that. And that's often it's called the CM at risk. The construction manager at risk is the other term for this. So if it doesn't come in under, they have to eat that cost essentially, or find a way to get it. So it behooves them to get it down. There's a relationship as well in the marketplace to try and do that.
My other question, that's okay. It's I get that, that everything needs to be bid out and you're there. The other question is kind of again following up on Mike's thing, that so if they start to see things going south on them, they will look for opportunities such as, shrinking the square footage. It sounds like that there's a lock preventing that, but they could substitute for lesser quality materials, for example, right? Things that we wouldn't necessarily want. So, what do we do to protect ourselves against that?
Well, that's where we have the architect that draws up the drawings, has specifications that meet our standards, and we're approving all of that. And they are separate entities. So they have to achieve that performance that quality level that is called out in the specifications. So that's a minimum. And that those volumes of books are, when you print it out, it's about 4 inches thick at an 8.5 by 11, that specification book for this project. So it's quite detailed, talks about, very detailed performance, quality standards for materials, finishes, devices, all of that is really quite well defined. And I think that's always the challenge, is for us as owners to understand that and get that through. But that's part of I guess that's my job.
All right. Well, last question then. So what's going to keep you up at night about this whole thing, Tom?
On this one, the availability of labor and materials, that long lead items, I mean, are going to drive this crazy. And that is one of the reasons that we're actually, the team has already been really good. The original proposal was to start in the summer, and they have come back and worked with Dr. Pearson out there to be able to free up the space, as well as get this started earlier. One, to control costs because inflation is so high. Also to get things in line before the summer, the classic summer school remodel and construction period. So we're trying to get in line and procure materials now before we get into that and guarantee. So that those are the big things that concern me. We have lead times that, insulation for the roof was one that for a while was a 9-month lead time, which is unbelievable. But through their work, they've been able to find some that somebody will hold. And that's why we're trying to get this contract so that we can buy that and make sure we hold on to it. All
right, Tom, you got my support. Thanks.
There are a lot of other things that keep me up, but
I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So we have a motion on the table to approve the agreement with Lease Crutcher Lewis, the contract, and for $6,898,045. Donna, can you call the roll, please?
Holly Johnson,
Aye.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Aye.
Austin Folneggy,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola.
Aye, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Tom.
thank you so much. And Mike and Angela, I want to thank you for your questions because they're always good. And I would have been very concerned if the board didn't ask questions on this one. It's, $7 million is a lot to spend. So we'll get bigger contracts, but it's tough. So thank you so much. Have a great evening.
I'm glad to see we're making some investments in our property in Florence. So let's go ahead and move on to our discussion items. The first discussion item is really more informational in nature. It's regarding the presidential search update, but we are incredibly excited to be having 4 finalists visit us next week. On March 7th, Dr. Klein Namuo will be coming for an interview. Dr. Namuo is the interim president for Phoenix College, Maricopa Community College in Phoenix, Arizona. On March 8th, Dr. Kim Armstrong will be visiting, and Dr. Armstrong is Vice Chancellor for Student Equity and Community Affairs at Arkansas State University, Three Rivers in Malvern, Arkansas. On March 9th, Dr. Chris Villa will be here, and Dr. Villa most recently served as president of Portland Community College Rock Creek in Portland, Oregon. And then on March 10th, Dr. Stephanie Bolger will be here for a finalist interview. And Dr. Bolger is Vice Chancellor for Instructional Services at the San Diego Community College District in San Diego, California. Each of these finalists will be here for a full day, and they'll be beginning their day with some final engagement with the Board of Education, and the day will also include forum with college and stakeholder groups, as well as a community forum in the evening. All of the community forums will be held at the Mary Spildy Center downtown and begin at 5:30. And anyone interested in watching that via Zoom, the information is available on the LCC website at the President search page. And there are opportunities for people to view the community forum and for LCC stakeholders to view the college forum, and there is a process to provide feedback to the board. So that's about the amount of information I have regarding that. Mike?
Could you just remind us of other significant dates in the search process, Lisa?
So for that week, it's Monday the 7th, Tuesday the 8th, Wednesday the 9th, and Thursday the 10th. So Monday through Thursday of next week. And then the board will be meeting in executive session to deliberate on Sunday the 13th.
And hoping to take action when?
Well, I think we'll be discussing that in executive session.
Okay. Thanks.
Lisa,
Yep.
is that Sunday meeting via Zoom, in person?
It's
Reminder?
via Zoom.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to an update and report from Dr. Hamilton on the Northwest Commission of Colleges and Universities letter of full accreditation.
Thank you. It's really great to co-present this with Richard. You know, this is back in 2016, when I was first looking into coming to Lane, we were a school on warning, and there was a lot of work ahead. When I got here, I was really happy that faculty and staff had already taken it on and had started to address what the creditors had brought to their attention. We had an interim visit that went so very well, and it all culminated with a 2-year process. These things take a long time, those of you that have been through this. So it was a full 2-year process. First was more the business end report, followed by the focus on academics. We were evaluated under the new standards, and Dr. Platt, really can't thank him enough. He took the lead in organizing it. We heard nothing but compliments about the process, the document, and then most important though, the improvements that this college made. So at that point, I really want to hand it over to Dr. Platt to talk a little bit about what happened, how did this all happen, and what happens next. Dr. Platt.
Thank you, ma'am, and good evening, board members. We are just ecstatic to report that we are fully accredited for the next 7 years without any follow-up reports whatsoever. That is outstanding. We want to give a great hand clap to everyone in the college. I can't stress enough that the president of the commission, along with our officer, complimented us so highly on a fully transparent process. It showed in the interviews with faculty, classified, students, and management. They were all seeing the fruits of the efforts of the college to be in of one mind, one accord, and going in one direction for the benefit of our student. It shows in the 6 commendations under the new standards. We are a leading school under the new standards. I just can't be happy enough for setting the stage for the next 7 years under these new accrediting standards. I've never had such a good fortune, and I'm so very grateful. In closing, the next time we will be reporting will be in 2024. It is a mid-year report. We look to be successful in that one as well. Some of the follow-up items on needs improvement have already been implemented, which is why we did not get follow-up reports. They just want to see it looked at in the mid-year cycle. So again, a great congratulations to everyone in the college, the great support we had from the president's office and from you and the board. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Richard. I see Rosie Pryor has her hand up.
I just want to compliment Dr. Platt and Dr. Hamilton. This is my second time through an accreditation process. And I have to say, this was extraordinarily well done. You deserve a lot of credit to get 5 commendations. That's extraordinary. So kudos to you and to all the people who worked on this at Lane. I'm really proud of this, really proud of this.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say that there's almost too many people to thank, because this was extraordinary. The amount of people, faculty really, really rose to the occasion. But I am going to single out the team. Richard, what were there, 30 people? Just
32 team members,
people.
which participated in assembling the report.
Yeah, and our writer, I've never worked with such a wonderful writer, Gina, and I think it took a village to get this done. So thank you all.
Great, thank you. All right, our next discussion item is PERS bond sales, and we have the college controller, Greg Holmes, to speak with us about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Hamilton. If you allow me to tee this up, this is a conversation that we started in our May meeting, in our February work session. So if you let me tee it up, I want to see if I can share my screen, which great, I have access. So why are we here? Well, we're here back in May 6th in the budget message in 2020. We talked about the challenges that PERS cost is going to escalate on us, right? We talked about in 2004, 2005, 2010, in anticipation of that increases in PERS rates, the college built up a PERS reserve. But over the last 4 years, we've been drawing that down at an $860,000 clip. Our unfunded liability keeps growing. And you can see in the corner, in this graph up here in this corner, where this is the general fund's any fund balance, right? So this is our board minimum. This is where we ended up in FY20. Fortunately, FY21 we had a surplus, right? But this is where we were a year ago. So what prompted that was then we started looking at, what are the other options to help bring our rates down? And so we invited Carol Samuels of Piper Sandler to come to our work session and give a 20-minute presentation. Normally her presentation is a 48 slide deck and it's an hour presentation, but she cut it down for us to 18. So when you look at it, the first step when you analyze it, the state requires a statistical analysis, and the college engaged Echo Northwest. So this is the first step at looking at, does it make sense? And so we covered this in the work session. This report is a $20,000 report, but we joined 15 other districts to help spread that cost out. And so that's part of the timing difference. This is a report that's required before you proceed. And at that time, looking at in February, she's saying that the total cost of issuing a $60 million 20-year debt is right at the 3.5%, what they call all-in cost. So this includes all the costs of the debt that we're going to issue. So this is where we're at. Why are we here February 6th? I do want to bring up in the work session, I don't think we got back to board member Pryor's question about how it gets paid. And I know Carol Carol talked about this, right? She talked about how the debt service, which is right here. So in this column right here, this is the annual debt service of the college. But what she didn't say, and what we didn't get a chance to talk about, is to get a better rating on our bonds. When you do issue PERS bonds, you have to do what's called a bond intercept payment. So what that means is the money that we get from state, this does not come to the college. The state takes these payments, these debt payments out, and they send them to the escrow bank. So we don't even see this payment, and our escrow payment pays our PERS bonds. And this allows us to borrow money and get a better bond rating. We covered 2003. So if you remember timing, if you're looking at the perfect time to sell bonds and to do a side account, 2002 and 2003 was a perfect time to do that, right? We sold back then, we sold at a 5.72, almost a 6%. And back then they had models that showed, hey, at 6%, you're still gonna come ahead. So to date, by selling these pension bonds, as the time of this report was 2020, we've saved $26 million. Each year we get the differences between the rate credits versus our debt service, right? Looking out, this 2002 issue sunsets in 2028. So we will we'll end our debt service, but we'll also our side account will go away, right? So there's this impending doom. So now, if we look at some of the assumptions that were built in the model, and these are things, it's important to note the fine print here. This is based on if our payroll growth is at 3%, average rate of return is at 6.9%. We expect to save another 13 million. Why that's important, again, we go back to the budget message, and we've been, we're getting savings with our side accounts, but we're also drawing down our reserves the last 4 years on our PERS fund to keep our OPE rate down. And so timeline, there was a question on timeline, and this is just a pro forma timeline. It could be done in as soon as 4 months, but there's some steps here, right? So once we decide, we notify our Piper Sandler and bond counsel that we want to proceed. So it starts off resolution drafts. We send up payoff requests to PERS. We adopt it, but there's some hard costs here. So Piper Sandler and bond counsel only gets paid if we sell the bonds. But there is some other costs when you look through the April and May. So we have to get a bond rating. And I believe the last one was right around 10,000 on our GO bonds. So that would be a hard cost, whether or not we sell it or not. And then there's fees when we send it to the Treasury. So there's some hard costs. But as you work through this, there'll be a call on May. There'll be a call certain, and we had that with our GO bonds to say, is this a go or not go? How's the market conditions? When we did our GO bonds back in August 20, we decided, hey, the market was looking good enough that we sold our full 121 million, half of it in tax exempt, and the other half basically in taxable. So even if we do proceed down there, there's always that final call. This would be May 9th. That whoever the board chooses to make that call to whether or not we do a procedure. We sell the funds, and the very next month we can request PERS to use that, and payroll rates will be reduced. We talked about the risks involved. I'm not sure if we had enough time to talk about the risks. And then I guess back to the end question, and this is what Dr. Hamilton asked me, is what do you recommend? Well, so it's something that we need to do as a college to think about what we're doing with our PERS, and I appreciate the time that the board has allowed at the work session and tonight. But even Carol was talking about this it's prudent for employers to have reserves to offset fluctuations. Again, our scenario that's in the packet, we're school A. We're not school A. This is school A example that she presented, but we actually sold at the same time that this school did, which was, when you look back in hindsight, that's the best time. So as of the 2020 valuation, again, PERS is late. Our site account is at 47 million. Their unfunded liability, which is considered a soft cost, is calculated at 111 million. So we have the potential in 2020 to borrow up to 64 million for our unfunded liability. When we do that, that makes it a hard cost, and we're locking ourselves in for the next 20 years. So with that, I wanted to tee up the conversation and then open it up for board conversation and discussion.
You want to go ahead and stop sharing so we can go ahead and have a discussion?
Sure.
Great. Okay, so any comments or questions by board members? Steve?
Yeah, Greg, I think you started to get at it just at the end, but maybe you can just go in a little more detail. Why 60 million? Or I think that's the number that you're suggesting. Can you explain how you arrived at that amount as the suggested amount for the bond?
Correct. So that's that calculation that PERS does, that Mercer does, or Milliman's does for the PERS, and that's our unfunded that's our share of the unfunded liability of the PERS system. And so the college can borrow up to that $64 million, and that's a calculated liability. Am I making sense, or should I share the screen for you?
Well, I thought the UAL was 120 or something, actually somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, so that you're right. So what you're seeing is you saw the UAL at 111.
Yeah.
But then we had a side account for 47 million.
Oh, okay. So
the
you
net
subtract the
UAL.
one. So we are allowed to, by, I don't know, state law, whatever it is, to float a bond equal to 100% of our liability.
I believe, yes, I believe.
And so the recommendation is to float a bond for 100% of it, as opposed to 50% of it or 75% or something like that to mitigate the risk.
My recommendation is, and this is what I talked to Dr. Hamilton so I'm on the fence, right? We have a turnaround at FY21. Our operating funds are going up, right? So FY21, it looks like FY22 is projected to be at a surplus. So we had many years of deficit spending, and that got us down in FY20 with a $2.7 million ending fund balance in the general fund. So as we turn it, right? So I think as a finance officer, I would want to go to college council and the other administration and the board to make sure that there's a commitment to building our reserves in the time, and that's difficult to do, right? I mean, so we're right now in the budget season, so we're already reducing our deferred maintenance. So come in and say, hey, I want to save $1 million. We need to build, set aside $1 million to build this reserve. There's trade-offs, and so again, building those reserves will help you in the future years. In case the debt service exceeds the rate credit that you get.
So I have myself in the queue. So Greg, can you explain what are the risks if we don't purchase bonds And what are the risks? I think I understand the risks if we do. I think we heard a really good presentation on that last time, but what are the risks if we don't, if we do nothing?
Yeah, so in 2028, right, our site account goes to 0, right? So that's you have to decrease it to 0. And we're projected over the next 6 years to have PERS savings of about $1.2 million, right? So from that presentation, if you look at that on slide 13, or the PDF slide of 13, you'll see that there's a $13 million being projected in additional savings. After 28, PERS rates are going to climb. And so the calculations that's coming out of PERS right now shows the amount of money that we're paying for tier 1 and tier 2 employees is increasing, right? So right now it's at 11% per payroll. So for every 11 cents of every dollar we're paying for that liability. As that goes projecting, you know, there's projections that's showing that creeping up to 20 cents per dollar just on the retirement accounts.
So in other words, the increased costs that we need to plan for would come out of where?
Well, it comes out of all the funds. It comes out of all the funds, right? I mean, so most of our employees are in the operating funds. So, you know, I think we have about 30 or 40 million in let's just say it's 40 million. So if it gets up to 20 cents, we're paying 8 million a year on just retirement, right? This is just tier 1. And then we also pay 6%, right, for the IAP portion. So you're getting up to about 26 to 30 cents on just retirement benefits with this PERS.
Rosie?
I support taking this step, provided there can be a mechanism to bind the board and future boards, which is problematic, to achieving the reserves that Greg's talking about. I mean, we're like a family who relies on contract income, and we need to pay a big bill, and we rely on occasional income. We can't depend upon our income. So it's incumbent on us to squirrel away in savings some of our day-to-day income in case we go through a dry spell. So we have the reserves to make our house payment and other payments if we go through a dry spell. We won't be able to do that if we don't put money in savings, and the fiscal discipline has not been there in the last decade. So I'm a little concerned that there needs to be some unanimous board support to build those PERS reserves and to commit to not using them the way they've been used in the last 3 years, which I never supported, in order to provide a cushion should we go through a dry spell. It's important that if we're going to do this, we do it quickly, because interest rates are going to go up. The Fed is talking about raising interest rates. It's important for us to do this before they do if we want to achieve the desired outcome. So I support doing this. I hope the board will be willing to commit to some fiscal discipline to build those reserves.
Steve?
I also support moving forward with this. The decision tonight doesn't commit us ultimately to floating the bonds. It commits us to a process that we would have a final decision on sometime in May. So I am committed to moving forward. It seems like the further down this path we get, the more certainty we will have about more precisely what the costs will be, what the interest rate will be. So it makes all the sense in the world for me to continue down that path. So I'm in support and vote in support. Just to respond to Rosie's thought, I mean, I agree. We're being told that the smart thing to do is to put some money away. We haven't been doing that apparently the past handful of years, understandable to an extent. but there will be painful times probably in the future. And I guess I would just say that, well, I think what we're being asked to do is put away something like $2 million, something like that per year. It's going to be hard to do that without raising tuition, Rosie.
And so just to clarify, Steve is correct. We don't need to take a vote or take an action tonight. If I understand correctly, when around March 9th, if we were directing the president to move forward with this process, that would be the time that the board would vote to actually purchase bonds. Is that correct, Greg?
I was going to unmute. I'm already unmuted. I'm looking at the timeline again. That was just a pro forma. So it takes some time to work with bond counsel to draft the resolution, right? Notify them. So 4 months. You're talking for March, April, May, June, and it can be done in 4 months. So I think I told Dr. Hamilton 4 to 6 months to be safe. And to that point, I do want to say, I'm not suggesting saving I mean, in an ideal world, I'd like to reserve $2 million, and I would like to fund deferred maintenance at the $3 million level that the experts are telling us. So I'm not saying $2 million. I would like to see a systematic growth. And we can do that on a monthly basis by paying ourselves each month. We pay PERS, our rate, and we pay a rate through our OPE rate on a monthly basis, where it's not taking a dramatic $2 million out. Looking at next year and working with BDS to suggest to take a $2 million out of next year's budget, I think would be, we're still coming out of the pandemic into the endemic. So hopefully, we're back on campus, students come back. But from a finance, if I project $2 million, and Zach is going to have to even cut more. So I think a good goal would be 500,000.
500,000 annually?
No, I think next year would be a good 500,000. I think an annual might be a good 500,000. We can look at rates and how our bond sales sells, but looking at it, if I was to look at something now, I'd say a $500,000.
Marge, had you wanted to add something? I thought I saw you unmute.
Actually, I'm actually talking to Greg back and forth about I knew the 2 million was too much. That's over 5 years, 2 to 5 million over 5 years. I just wanted to make sure Greg corrected us on that. It's really, I think it's doable. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about $500,000 building it into the budget, and it's doable. And I'm extremely relieved to hear that every month we'll hear how it's going, and we'll see how the market's going, and we'll see how the economy is going, and it will help you feel even better before we push a button May or June.
Well, I would just like to say that I'm in agreement with Rosie in that if we are going to do this, then we need to move this process forward now, because there is the likelihood that interest rates are going to increase. And from the presentation that we saw at our work session, we're still within that zone of, that Carol was describing, where we will do okay at around 3.5%, but we don't want to go past a certain interest rate. And so I would be supportive of directing the president to start moving us forward, with the understanding that ultimately it is the board's decision to purchase the bonds. I see some agreement. And Marge, do you have enough direction from us as a board? Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right. You were You were right on 25 minutes with that, Greg. Thank you. Going to move us on to a COVID update from Provost Gerald. Hi, Paul.
Good evening, Chair Fragler. I
Oh,
see
sorry.
a hand
Yep,
up.
I
Yeah,
see
sorry.
Angela. Angela, yes.
Sorry. I wanted to suggest that we take Rosie's recommendation around sort of managing what Greg is suggesting in terms of our savings, and perhaps consider putting that in policy, maybe something along the lines of the ending fund balance related policy. I think that is the mechanism for being really clear about what the board's responsibilities are, even future boards. So I'm not suggesting that we make an addition to a policy tonight, but it's just a question for maybe how we might operationalize that.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think Marge got that in terms of how she's going to move this forward. Thank you. All right.
All righty. Thank you again, Chair Fragler. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present a brief update on some changes that are on the horizon regarding our approach to dealing with the pandemic, and not just our approach, but how our approach will fall out, pending changes that are coming with regard to recommendations for safety. It looks like I over the past 2 weeks, we've had so many changes, and you will hear something on a Monday, and on a Wednesday it's changed again. This reminds me of when we were starting the pandemic, that kind of flood of changes, and hearing guidance on a Monday and having it change on a Tuesday. I think we're going to see that now increasing over the next month as we navigate our way through the other side of the pandemic and learn to live and manage COVID as an endemic. As you are aware, we do have quite a changing landscape right now. Rates are dropping. They are approaching pre-Omicron surge levels, and also even approaching levels we haven't seen since the summer, which was pre-Delta surge. So we really are seeing those case rates, the positivity rate drop. As we transition through that, we'll also continue to see hospitalizations drop. They dropped, I think, in the state 30% or so over the past week. So we're starting to see all of these things drop. And as a result, you're aware that we're starting to see changes in recommendations, changes in guidelines and recommendations from CDC, from the Oregon Health Authority, from OSHA, and Lane County Public Health. All are revising or on the verge of revising recommendations as we navigate our way through this change. The state has announced that they're lifting indoor and school mask mandates, lifted effective March 12th. We had the emergency declaration rescinded as of April 1st. And I just saw this evening as I was sitting here preparing for this update, that the state just announced that they're pausing contact tracing and quarantining, except in high-risk settings. So we're really seeing a lot of changes, and what the changes are, a lot of the things that's leading to the changes, again, recognizing as we're moving into a endemic as opposed to a pandemic, is that the CDC has changed metrics. I guess we said change. They've updated metrics to be more inclusive, to include not only just cases and positivity rates, but also hospitalizations and the percent of beds that are occupied by COVID patients. So it's a more comprehensive measure to determine whether a community is at a high, medium, or low risk due to COVID. Lane County is currently at high risk by the metrics, but the CDC hasn't updated their website. They only do it weekly, and the last submissions were on February 24th from Lane County. County public health officials indicate that they're pretty confident that Lane County will drop when those fresh data are uploaded. And I suspect that they might even be uploaded as early as tomorrow, but certainly sometime this week. The county has indicated that they don't plan to have any local mandates. that are apart from the state and the CDC mandates. So given that conditions are improving and we will be moving out of a high-risk category, we'll see those restrictions and recommendations that govern our policies and procedures, we'll see those change locally. I think that, some of the issues that we need to consider is that as the county changes, and our employees and students are facing different kinds of restrictions and regulations and requirements on campus than they face in the general community, it always will bring up compliance issues. And we're certainly hoping to avoid those and hope that we can certainly stay in line with county recommendations. So we'll always look to the county, we'll always follow their lead to be able to be as safe as we can. There really are only a couple of the requirements that really impact a lot of our operations significantly, I would say, and the mask wearing and social distancing are the two primary ones. If we are in lower risk when the new data are updated, we'll fall into a category with the CDC for Institutes of Higher Education that really now recommend mask wearing indoors if you're not up to date on your vaccinations. If you are up to date, if you're in a high transmission risk, that they would recommend mask wearing then. And also outdoors, if you yourself are a high-risk individual because of a compromised immune system or some other pre-existing condition that might make you a little bit more susceptible. With regard to social distancing, it will be recommended for individuals that are not up to date with their vaccinations. This one has had impacts on us from an instructional point of view. As you're aware, to maintain social distancing, we've really reduced class sizes for our in-person classes for the most part where we needed to maintain social distancing. And we've had to operate more sections than normal to be able to accommodate student need because of those smaller class sizes. So we're hoping that as conditions improve, social distancing will be relaxed as well. It, as I mentioned before, will likely only be recommended for individuals that are not up to date with vaccinations. So we're trying to keep up with all of this as things change. We're engaging the campus community in conversations with the COVID advisory team and other folks about the impacts of these changes that might be coming, and trying to gauge and solicit feedback from the greater campus community about implications and unintended consequences of either changing or not changing a particular requirement that we may have when the state and local authorities change their recommendations. Happy to answer any questions. Again, as I mentioned, it's a really shifting landscape. We'll certainly know a lot more over the next few weeks, but I suspect we'll have a new update at that point with new recommendations. So happy to entertain any questions.
Austin.
Hey there. Yeah, I agree. Really, lots of shifts. And so the CDC requirement or recommendations based on higher education institutions, there's a difference between institutions that did a vaccine mandate and those that didn't. There is
no. They changed that actually. Yeah.
They actually changed that. Okay.
Yeah. So that bifurcation doesn't exist anymore. It's just whether individuals are, they base their guidance upon whether an individual on a particular campus is up to date with their vaccinations or not.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I see Steve, and then I have myself in the queue. Steve?
Oh, can you just explain to me the process that we currently have at LCC to change our or update our mask policy indoors? If somebody wants, if we feel, based on the recommendations from CDC and the state and everybody else, it's safe to do so. What kind of process do we have to go through on campus to achieve that?
So I'll tell you the process, and then I'll tell you the kind of modifications based upon some other issues. So our current process would be that we tend to follow local guidelines, right? And if the Lane County were to come back with recommendations about mask wearing, we would engage with a conversation on campus about, which we did actually what is it? Yesterday we did actually, to try to gauge a sense of comfort and people's concern if we were to make mask wearing optional for folks that were up to date on vaccinations in anticipation that this is going to occur. We take that feedback. President Hamilton takes that feedback, and in consultation with her team in terms of our COVID compliance officer and our health director, she will make a recommendation. Our ability to implement that recommendation is limited to some extent based upon memorandum of understanding and memorandum of agreement with the two union groups on campus, the EA and the EF, where we follow, more conservative guidelines if they're out there. So we're looking to see, what would be the recommendation under, Lane County Public Health's recommendation, and is it implementable based upon MOAs that we signed back in early fall. I think you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thanks. Thank you for the explanation.
You're quite welcome.
So it's not super clear to me, but we have some obligation to the unions, or the unions have some bit of the, the final decision making. Is there, or is that not true?
Well, I would phrase it that we have a memorandum of agreement that's contractual language that we can't violate, right? We don't go, I suppose we could go back to the unions if a recommendation was not in alignment with some language that we agreed to back in September. We could go back for some modifications, but we're bound by that language. We don't ask it's not like we have to go to the unions for their approval. We just need to follow that. We certainly seek their advice, and they're represented on our COVID advisory team, but we're just obligated to follow the language of the MOA. It's contractual.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have myself in the queue, and then we'll go to Austin. So Paul, I heard you keep talking about the different health governance organizations, different recommendations for things like wearing masks is based on an individual's vaccination status. And so is that going to largely be up to an individual to self-monitor? And I know many of from what I'm reading, many of the new guidelines are based on a high vaccination level in a population, which it sounds like Lane County is approaching a very high vaccination rate, which for at least one vaccination. So I'm wondering how all of that will be taken into consideration and what we're considering.
Yeah, so you're right. Lane County does have it's approaching 80% in a vaccination rate. We currently are in the 93.5% range. Now, mind you, that will drop as a vaccination if we don't have a vaccination requirement, simply because we know we've lost students as a result of that. So if we don't have that and students start coming back, we might see that rate drop. Certainly wouldn't drop below the level of the county, I don't think, but it's still going to be relatively high, I think, in terms of the vaccination status. We have not, for lack of a better way to describe it, we've not policed compliance necessarily. We've encouraged it. We've had messaging both through emails and things like that to encourage mask wearing. We have lots of signage on campus to be compliant and things like that, but we haven't. We've felt that there's more risk to the potential conflict around approaching someone and asking them, I think, to verify their vaccination status than there is actually probably with just assuming, if you yourself are worried, you may wear a mask, right? So it's not like masks become optional that you stop wearing it, it's still up to you. So we've done the kind of honor system, and we haven't had conversations about how we would approach monitoring compliance around that piece if it is for the unvaccinated. When we had talked about it last summer, prior to fall, starting to see the Delta surge and thing like that, we were anticipating similar kinds of approaches where, again, it would be by honor system, mask wearing required, if you will, for those that aren't vaccinated or not up to date, and then optional for anyone else. We weren't going to police that. And then also with regard to distancing, our goal was to set up some distance spaces in the back of each room. So there was the option for folks to sit in a distance manner, but we weren't going to really monitor the compliance for that by forcing people to show that they were vaccinated or have that be indicated somehow on a card or something like that. But we haven't had that conversation about moving forward. What would we do, for example, if we did have it be optional?
Right. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't recommend any of those kind of punitive or
Very
conflictual
challenging.
actions, but I do think there's a lot that could be done based on education and information that we provide to the college community, in addition to, the practice of, I think hopefully many people have learned that, when you start to feel sick, you don't push through it and go to class or go to work or whatever, right? And so I would hope that there'll be, and I think we've done a great job throughout the pandemic of getting information out and educating people. So I hope we would continue to do that.
Yeah, and I think strong, consistent messaging from multiple platforms is really what's going to be necessary. I think having a lot of signage around, we will still have available upon request masks for students and employees, certainly. So I think, again, in the education piece is there, and I think a lot of folks are going to still continue. I know myself, I'll still continue to wear a mask in places where I might feel that it's a little bit too crowded for my comfort or something. So I think in general, we won't see such a split all of a sudden where no mask wearing, and then only those wearing masks will be those that aren't up to date on vaccinations. I think it will still be a significant portion of vaccinated individuals that are up to date that will choose to mask. Yeah.
Austin, had you had a comment? No. Okay. Is there anyone else that has a question or a comment? All right. Well, keep us updated, and thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Okay, so we're going to move on to stakeholder reports, and we're going to start with LCCEF with Frankie Kokenor. Welcome, Frankie.
Hi, thank you very much. Let me get there, apologize. So I just want to say, first off, again, I've been having computer issues all day. Internet issues. Thankfully, I have not dropped yet during this meeting, but I might drop. So anyways, good evening. My name is Frankie Kokenor, and my pronouns are she and her. LCCEF would like to welcome you, Dr. George Salyard, to Lane Community College. We're really excited to work with you, and we hope that you come to love our community as much as we do. Tonight, we'd like to acknowledge the vicious and inhumane attack against Ukraine by Russia. I am hoping that the world's efforts to stop Russia will work, and if they don't, we can step up and do more to save the Ukrainian people. We have classified colleagues that are from Ukraine and have family that are there right now where the bombing has taken place. It is heartbreaking, and it is very scary. It's a very scary time for them. We have stories about their coworkers giving them support and feeling very scared and worried for them, and our hearts go out to them. Such a stressful time. I can't imagine. Last night, I listened to President Biden's State of the Union. I was very moved about so many things that he said, especially when he reminded us about what his wife calls America's best kept secret, community colleges, and how he discussed moving manufacturing jobs, including Intel, back to America. Community colleges are where you go for apprenticeships. It's where many people who do blue collar jobs go to get their training. After hearing his speech, I was left hoping that our college can find ways to expand our programs that will help with bringing manufacturing jobs home with our skill to work programs that we already have in our community. This weekend, there was a news article at the Register Guard where possible cuts to labor was discussed. LCCEF would like to know how we can keep providing quality education to students if cutting jobs continues to be the best solution for this college. How do we get funding for education, schedule rooms, or how do we continue to get funding for education, schedule rooms, provide cleaning spaces, protect students, and with so many more vital services classified personnel provide? if we close our departments or lay off employees? And how do students get an education if faculty or programs continue to be cut? In the end, it's going to be a school that provides only a handful of programs. And if that's the case, then there will be many students that will be forced to commute to community colleges in other counties instead of attending our school. This falls in line with President Biden saying lower costs, not wages. Maybe the college needs to find ways to lower costs, not cut jobs. In communities such as Lane County, our community colleges don't just provide an education for students, they provide a stable job to members of the community. What we are asking is that we all work together to provide ways to raise revenue through fundraising and grants instead of doing the easiest thing, laying off an employee who has a family to support. It's time to pick community over cutting jobs and put public service ahead of profits. And I'd also like to say that LCCEF stands with the college on banding credits. And we think that is a really amazing, great idea and could be very helpful for a student that wants to take full-time classes. That's 4 classes to achieve 12 credits. So thank you.
Thank you, Frankie. Up next, we have LCCEA and Adrian Mitchell. Welcome, Adrian.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Tonight, I will address a couple of topics. The first is retrenchments, and the second is a few LCCEA updates. So not our favorite topic, but one that is impacting our campus community is retrenchments. So first, what is a retrenchment? For faculty, retrenchments occur when there's a partial or full reduction in a contracted faculty member's position. When there's a partial or full retrenchment and the affected contracted faculty member is qualified to teach in other disciplines or programs, the faculty member is transferred to teach in the other discipline in accordance with our contract and relevant seniority language. However, when the affected faculty member is not qualified to teach in another area, the faculty member is laid off either in part or in full. We do have some timelines that apply. In all cases, there are contractual timelines, and the college must notify the association by March 15th and the individual by May 1st for any retrenchments that will take effect in the fall term. At other times of the year, the college must provide 90 days notice. Why is this important? Timelines allow for meetings to discuss alternatives and impacts of the retrenchment, time to review qualifications, seniority, and transfer options for the retrenched faculty member, time for notice to faculty members and disciplines and programs that will be impacted due to bumping, time for affected faculty members to adjust to reduced or eliminated employment, which may include both faculty whose positions were reduced, as well as part-time and contracted faculty who lose assignments after bumping, time for faculty members who are transferred to another area to prepare for and engage in professional development for teaching in the new discipline, and a baseline of stability for all contracted faculty members so that everyone can rely on not suddenly losing their position or income with less than 90 days notice. Currently, planned retrenchments that will take effect in the fall include elimination of the hospitality program impacting 1 faculty member, reduction of the sociology program resulting in a partial reduction of 1 faculty member's sociology FTE. The affected faculty member will be partially assigned to another discipline, also impacting part-time staffing in the other discipline. Reduction of FTE for 1 or more cooperative education faculty coordinators. We anticipate this will include criminal justice. It may be limited to criminal justice, but are not yet certain as the college has indicated a review of more than 1 cooperative education discipline. Such changes will impact part-time faculty in criminal justice through bumping, and we do not yet know if there will be other bumping in other disciplines if there are other impacts to cooperative education. We understand the need for these retrenchments and will continue to work collaboratively with the college regarding their implementation. However, over the weekend, we learned of a partial retrenchment that the college is already implementing in the French program to take effect in spring term. Unfortunately, this partial retrenchment includes partial transfer of the affected faculty member to another discipline without sufficient notice or any notice at all until LCCEA inquired about this on Monday. The lack of notice is unprecedented. This presents many challenges for faculty and students alike. The second-year French courses have been canceled mid-year without an opportunity for students to continue the sequence. For students transferring to U of O, they now cannot finish their 2-year language requirement for a BA. Faculty need to be able to rely on our contract, especially regarding retrenchment and significant changes to faculty status and employment. We ask that our contractual timelines be honored and that any retrenchments, including French, take effect no sooner than fall term. A few updates on an unrelated topic from LCCEA. First, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Stalliard. In addition, we'd like to express appreciation for the collaborative work of Zach Evans on the Budget Development Subcommittee. And we're very excited to see that some of our legislative advocacy has been a really substantial statewide effort of many different groups, including OCCA and OEA, with the upcoming passage of the Governor's Future Ready Workforce Development Plan, which will include substantial funding for community colleges, as well as grants, which will help us expand programming in healthcare, construction, and manufacturing. Finally, we have been very active with LCCEA representatives participating in the OEA PAC endorsement process and have been highlighting community college needs with all of the prominent gubernatorial candidates, and are very happy to report the successful endorsement of former Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, and look forward to helping to ensure that we have an incoming governor who supports community colleges. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm not seeing anybody here from SGA, so I'm going to go ahead and move us on to information reports. Are there any questions about any of the reports that we received in our packet? Not seeing anyone, but I did have a question about a report from Mindy Dew on the childcare. And so I know we've got Mindy here. Hi, Mindy.
Hi.
So I was looking at the report that you provided on childcare. I appreciated it. I mean, like when I think of childcare or the early learning programs that we have, I was thinking like all one program, and was excited to hear we have so many, including downtown. And as I was reading through them, I could understand that LCC students who are parents are not paying for 100% of the cost. And I could understand the percentages of actual LCC students that are being served by these programs, but I wasn't clear on what the capacity is at. And so is the capacity of these programs at 100% so that it's no longer accessible, or is it less than that and there's still capacity to accept families?
Thank you for your question, Chair Fragla. I would like to remark that the Downtown Child Care Center has only been opened in the last 6 months. Thanks so much to the efforts of Cheryl Henderson, just really providing access for our families. My understanding is that we are at 100% capacity for these programs. The only way that we would be able to create more capacity is to lease out space to Head Start for some of our classrooms, and we would be able to provide more capacity, but that would be the expense, is to end the part of the lease with Head Start.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Steve, you have a question about a report?
Yeah, also on the childcare report, thanks for providing it, and thanks to Rosie, I think, really for generating the interest on the board side of things. Really to follow up on things that Rosie has asked in the past, so she's asking many times over about increasing capacity, et cetera, so that more of our students who might be having that childcare as a challenge, can go to school, et cetera, et cetera. How have you all, or could we, if you haven't, how might we assess what the additional demand is so that we could begin to plan for whatever it is, working with Head Start or building more capacity in some other way?
Well, I would consult with our expert on that, and that's definitely Cheryl Henderson. She has many connections throughout Lane County and throughout our community and across the state. I think it's a good indication that, we just opened up the downtown childcare center and it's already filled. So while I couldn't give you a specific tonight, I can give you a specific in the next couple of days. And I think that there's a good chance that we would be able to expand rather easily.
Yeah. To be clear, I didn't expect that you would have an answer on hand, but I think the next natural, I'm sorry to make you feel under pressure that way. It just feels like the next natural question, right? Following the report was to try and get some kind of a assessment of demand. And also, the dips and swings, how, because it must dip and swing. So we'd want to have some sense of what the sustainable amount would be over time so that we could plan for added space.
Sure. Yeah, it's not going to be unlimited, but I would say that, the need for childcare as parents are going back to work has really increased. I'm not sure how much and for how long, but that is something that she would know.
Art?
So a couple of things. You ask. Steve, basically that's how we find out. We ask. So I think we see a great interest in the board in helping us increase capacity, and I think our next step is to do some sort of surveys with students and basically ask them, because that's the only way we're going to know. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think you've all seen that Future Ready Oregon got through the Senate, and if I'm reading the specs on that, there should be childcare money. So I think the students who are going through those three sectors, whether they're healthcare, manufacturing, or the trades, will, if I'm reading this right, will be able to get money for childcare. And that means our focus will be on space. And, also there's the timing of it. Maybe sometimes you shift into a little bit into the evening and you can get more students in there. So there's options. I think we're going to look into this. It's a great thing that we are able to help. Do you remember, guys, we got the one phone call from the governor's office asking us, please keep open during the pandemic. So, we really helped a lot during the fires, the pandemic, and we're going to keep going. And I think we're going to look at space and see what we can do.
Rosie and then Austin.
So where this started was the state economist advising the Lane County Budget Committee that one of the barriers for people going back to work in Lane County is access to childcare. So the wrinkle in all of this is not talking to our existing students about their childcare needs. What we need to know is how many people are failing to come to Lane at all because they can't get access to affordable childcare. So that's really where my interest lies. I want to build back enrollment. In 2018, we had 13,098 FTE. In 2021, we had 7,878. Is it tuition? Is it childcare? Is it all those things? But the barriers are what are keeping us on our backs. So I want to talk to people who aren't yet students.
Austin.
Yeah, and President Hamilton, there is money for childcare in the Future Ready Oregon, but also there's competitive grants also. And those competitive grants, their distinct purpose is to remove barriers to improve access to workforce systems and education, training, employment, and career advancement priorities. So there's also going to be $95 million in competitive workforce grants, which some of those could be involved in childcare. Some of those could be involved in some other workforce priorities that would be helpful for Lane County. So I definitely see some great opportunities when this bill passes and gets signed.
Thank you for that conversation. And are there any other questions about other information reports or on this topic as well, Steve?
Slightly off topic. I guess I'm still new and I'm not quite sure. I have a request for future information reports. I'm not quite sure where I make those requests. Is now an opportunity or some other place?
Sure, now's a great time, Steve.
There are two of them. Paul, the second one's for you. So just letting you know that ahead of time. I'm responding to the public testimony we heard earlier this evening, which picked up on themes that we have heard at other times, right, where primarily part-time faculty are letting us know either directly or through proxies that, you know, they have serious struggles paying their bills, et cetera, you know, and being faculty, part-time faculty at LCC. So, and we only hear that from their side. We hear those stories and they're heart-wrenching. I guess what the information request I'd like to make is to just learn a little bit more about what that pay rate looks like. Because we haven't had that side of it. I have no idea, honestly, what a part-time faculty salary looks like, how it differs from full-time faculty, what the benefits differences are. I do know, I believe, right, that we are one of a small handful of institutions that is making healthcare benefits available to part-time faculty, but I'm sure there are other kinds of benefits that are out there that maybe they're receiving, maybe they're not. I just plainly don't know. I would like to know more about that so that we can be more informed and start considering, you know, whatever our options might be to address the situation. And I'm not trying to signal that there are options. I start off with information. So that was one. The other one is back to the banding issue, which I know was not sort of directly on the agenda this evening, but it's coming back for discussion and action in the near future. I was reminded about, I think in the consent agenda, right, we passed plans for whatever it was, 3 or 4 new certificates and programs. And it reminded me, and the credit requirements for those were not divisible by 15 or 16. So it got me thinking that if we are to, in the next month or two, vote to support the banding initiative, which I am in support of, I indicated that at our recent work session, it would be incumbent on us to be fairly certain that in addition to encouraging students to take more classes, that we actually are able to offer them those classes in the, you know, as frequently as they need them, right? The worst thing that could happen is that we encourage them to take more classes, we incentivize them to do so, and then they come back and tell us, but the classes aren't there, so I'm ending up by only taking 12 credits, and I have to blow into the next term in order to finish up my certificate. So in the end, you actually cost me more. I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen, but I do think it's incumbent on us to do some analysis to convince ourselves that we are making, that we have thought that through, right? And that we have an answer for that to students. Maybe not to every last one of them. I don't expect we can satisfy everybody all the time, but we ought to be looking at our programs to make sure that designing them so that they can really be completed in the way that we are incentivizing students to take credits going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm sure Dr. Hamilton has noted both of those topics, and we are planning on bringing that banding conversation back to the next work session. We had thought about bringing it to this board meeting, but Paul had suggested that it would be beneficial to the process if he had more time to take a look at some of the things that you are actually highlighting. So that we'll see that at our next work session. All right. Any other questions or comments on information reports? Okay, so I'm going to move us on to board reports, including OCCA board report. Austin, did you have anything?
Yeah, I saw Angela had her hand up though.
Mm-hmm.
Did she have?
Angela, did you have a question about a report?
I have a question about future meeting dates, which is later in the agenda, so I'll
Okay.
raise my hand.
Austin, did you have a board report?
Yeah, altogether, obviously, it's been mentioned multiple times about the legislative session. We're getting to the end here on that, and yeah, there's some exciting things that are in legislation right now, and and then of course in April we got some awards to hand out, and we have an honorary board member that is going to give one of those awards. So I look forward to April, and Rosie, I'm really happy to see your name on there. So thank you.
Great. And we already had a little update on the president search. And I don't know, are there any other board reports? Steve?
Very briefly, I read in one of the reports, I think it was the provost report, now I've forgotten which one, that Jennifer Frey, who I see is here, won an award. And I just wanted to say congratulations, great job. And we take pride in the things that our faculty and staff do. So thank you for your hard work.
Congratulations, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Rosie?
So in the same vein, it's an extraordinarily profound exercise of freedom to be able to sit here and say, while there's a war going on somewhere in the world, sit here and say, our women's basketball team is #1 in the Northwest, and our men's basketball team is #2. That's pretty hot. Congratulations.
Okay, so I do see a hand up. I'm not sure if that's an old hand or not. Steve? Okay. All right. So future meeting dates. I have our work session for March 16th, and then a regular board meeting that first week of April on April 6th. And Angela, what was your question about future meeting dates?
I was wondering, do we usually put executive sessions on there? And do we need to have anything listed out for a meeting with presidential candidates next week? And also, I have been scouring my email and I can't find the time that we settled on for March 13.
So we settled on the 10th, at 10 a.m. And we will send that information out soon. And we haven't in the past put executive sessions on the upcoming meetings because we typically, if you notice, Donna actually publicly notices an executive session every time we meet in case we do need to meet in executive session. So, but yeah, 13th at 10, and we are, as you can imagine, to have a finalist visit of this nature where they are coming and interviewing and visiting the campus for an entire day with multiple groups of people, which means they're actually in town for about, probably 48 hours, arriving the day before, leaving the day after. It's a pretty significant endeavor, and I do want to appreciate the team that is working on making sure all of those details are in place. But we should have final details for you about many of those things in the next couple of days. We're getting to the point of wrapping it all up. But I really appreciate, I'm noticing that the board is very tuned in to when they need to be in attendance. So thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, well, we do not have an executive session tonight, and I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much and have a good evening.
Everybody.
Buddy.
Thank you. Good night.
And